Hello everyone. Before we start today's video, if you could all do me a solid and lightly tap the like button, perhaps share the video about and leave a comment. If you are not subscribed, subscribe as well. It would greatly help this channel. Thank you very much. Hello everyone, welcome back to Omegon 2 Electric Boogaloo. Today I want to talk about performance enhancing drugs and sport, and to do this, I want to talk about boxing, more notably a generational clash between Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn. Their fathers, Chris Eubank and Nigel Benn, are famous. They are legendary within the middleweight division in the United Kingdom, so not really on the global stage because both held WBO titles and that title wasn't highly regarded in that time. It is regarded slightly better now, but not by much. They had two fights, Chris Eubank winning the first and a draw the second time. A third fight should have happened, to be honest, just to settle it, but it didn't, and it was right to not. In both fights, Chris Eubank and Nigel Benn were punch bags. Their resistance is astonishing. In fact, Chris Eubank is renowned for having a concrete chin, something which his son appears to have inherited but hasn't really fought anyone yet that can test his chin. George Groves was probably the closest, and he did rock him a fair bit. Conor Benn is an up-and-comer. Chris Eubank Jr. fights in the middleweight division and super middleweight, but is more a middleweight because he's not really big enough for super middleweight. His power doesn't transfer up there. Conor Benn is a welterweight. When I first heard that this fight had been announced, I was a tad concerned. Akin to that of Amir Khan and Canelo, again 2 weight classes, Kell Brook and Triple G, 2 weight classes, welterweights and middleweights. Canelo has proven he is far too heavy-handed, and Khan should have never been in that ring, and the same applies to Kell Brook, who broke an eye socket. In this instance, it is a clear and obvious mismatch because of the weight. Both fighters' records don't really indicate them to be at that elite level that the other 4 that I've mentioned are at, or were at, as a number of them have already retired. So the only thing really that gets people's interest is the fact that this is a Eubank-Benn fight, a third one, a somewhat responsibility being passed on from the father to the son, even though Chris Eubank Sr. is not in favour of this fight in the first place. Nigel Benn just doesn't care, he's happy to be wherever, as long as he's able to be there for his son, who is a grumpy bastard. It's quite interesting, really, considering how grumpy Conor Benn is to how arrogant Chris Eubank is. Jr. He got that from his father as well, I think, since he trains himself for most of his fights. Early last week, there was some speculation the fight was going to be called off. The fight was supposed to happen on Saturday the 8th. It didn't happen. It got called off by the British Boxing Board of Control. And the reason why is because all fighters submit themselves to various forms of drug testing. This drug testing is conducted during camps before and even after the fight. They choose the governing bodies, but also other governing bodies that you are licensed to, those that sanction the fight, they will also impose upon you. It was revealed via journalists that an adverse finding had been found in one of Conor Benn's samples, the A sample. There is a B sample as well. Usually it just confirms the A sample anyway. It's very rare that the B sample then contradicts, undermines, or brings into question the A sample. This particular adverse finding was everywhere on Twitter for a number of reasons, and we're going to go through some tweets in a moment. This adverse finding, though, was enough that the British Boxing Board of Control postponed the fight. There are a number of contradictions I found within this, the whole situation, that really irritated me, and I'm going to state the first one right off the bat. The first is, had the media not leaked that the failed drug test even happened, the fight would have happened, which does mean by extension the only reason it was postponed is because we found out. Not because of the fighter safety, which there should have been a concern for in the first place, an obvious one. As is well established, money does talk, and everybody has a price. By all means, laugh like Ted DiBiase here. But fighter safety is paramount. But it's not because of the failed drug test I take issue. Again, it's the weight difference. This was at a catch weight of 157, I believe. Chris Eubank Jr. has never fought below 160, and Conor Benn is a 147. There's a rehydration clause as well. It means Chris Eubank can't rehydrate to his natural weight, which would be closer to 175, which in turn means Chris Eubank is already putting his health at risk to do something he's never done, and Conor Benn is having to put on phenomenal amounts of muscle mass and weight, which he'll then have to lose again if he wants to go and fight at welterweight. He's young enough he can get away with it, but it's a one-time thing. Is it really worth it? somebody weight drained, and somebody bulked up. Oh, but it totally balances out. Insert sarcasm sign here. Regardless of their records, this fight handicapped both for different reasons. So what was in Conor Benn's system that should not have been there? A women's fertility drug. And I wish I was joking. So courtesy of Mike Coppinger, the British Boxing Board of Control said that Conor Benn versus Chris Eubank Jr. is not allowed to take place after Conor Benn failed a drug test for the banned substance clomiphene. Eddie Hearn is attempting to obtain a court injunction to allow the fight to proceed as planned. Courtesy that, by the way, of ESPN. The British Boxing Board of Control actually put out a statement saying that on the evening of the 4th of October, the board of the British Boxing Board of Control Limited resolved that the contest between Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn, scheduled to take place on the 8th of October, is prohibited as it is not in the interests of boxing. That was communicated to the boxers and promoters involved on the morning of the 5th of October. At that time, Matchroom Boxing and Wasserman, who promote Chris Eubank Jr., released a statement confirming that the fight was still set to go ahead. It was believed that the way they were going to go around it, first of all, was that the British Boxing Board of Control had said there was an adverse finding, therefore they haven't outright stated the fight is not sanctioned. The second is they could have tried to get it sanctioned via another governing body, but because this is happening at the O2 Arena in the UK, you can't realistically get that done because the fight is being held on British ground. And so the boxers' individual licenses would have to be changed, and some are quite strict, even those that have a turnaround that is somewhat expedited. They were drawing on Hay versus Chisora for that to work. It doesn't work. Eddie Hearn at the time had refused to give up any hope of this fight happening, not least because it's a sold-out O2 Arena, and when their fathers fought, over 15 million people watched it. There is public interest in this fight. Although for many of us, it's very much a case of, so whose body's going to give out first? The guy who's weight drained and not allowed to rehydrate to his natural weight, or the guy who's bulked up? Noggin jogging, right? This was so bad, it was to the point that Matchroom, PEDs, Chris Eubank, Nigel Benn, Eubank, and various other iterations that involved their names, promoters involved, were trending on Twitter, and I wish I had caught most of them because honestly they needed to exist. So perhaps now we should talk about the drug in question. Clomid and clomiphene are the same, by the way. Carl Frampton tweeting this out. We can usually achieve a 100% increase in testosterone levels with Clomid. In some cases, one may see up to 200% increase. Well, it certainly explains this bulk then. This increase is not as high as pellets or injections, but it can make a big difference depending on how low you are. So if you had an initial level of 300, we would hope to see an increase to 600. Carl Frampton, boxing does itself no favors. There should be no grey areas. If you fail a drug test, you're banned, and in my opinion, you should be banned for life. I've been super cautious from my amateur days of what I can and can't take. I wouldn't take a multivitamin unless VADA approved. I refused a psoriasis ointment, a topical one, as it had steroids in it. Deterrents need to be stronger. Carl Frampton, to clarify what A and B urine samples are, you pee into a beaker, then that gets poured into two separate bottles. One is an A sample and the other is B. Same pee, different container. And because Carl Frampton is 100% correct on this, if you don't know who he is, he's a two-weight, multiple-time world champion, absolute Irish legend. Eubank Jr. was boiling down to a weight he hasn't been close to in years, with a contracted rehydration clause against a fighter that tested positive for a PED. Yet people still tried to make it happen. Let that sink in. When this all got announced, Chris Eubank Jr. put out a statement. Things have to be right, #Eubank Jr. Benn. Underneath is a 49-second video from an interview with Kugan Cassius of IFL TV, where he simply said things have to be right. He had played his part. Everything now was up to everyone else. Chris Eubank Jr. though has been very active on Twitter since this all transpired. First of all tweeting, "Conor, you got caught using an illegal substance, so the fight is off. Can't believe it. I really apologize to the fans and everyone that bought tickets, travelled and booked hotels. This should not have happened. He has escaped his schooling for now," with KSI underneath, honestly devastated. Won't lie, I'm not. I don't believe this fight should have happened in the first place. Chris Eubank also challenged Jake Paul, who had said, "I can't wait to see all the texts and emails between Eddie Hearn and all the parties involved in this fiasco. #Eubank Jr. Benn." Chris Eubank Jr. though retweeted, "How about I get you a jet to the UK tomorrow and we scrap at the O2 on Saturday for the fans that are now missing out because Conor Benn fumbled and crumbled under the pressure. You come in as heavy as you want. #for the fans." I don't think it would have sated their thirst or desire for the fight, but those who were able to go, at least the people on the undercard, would have been paid properly for the fights they trained for that they're going to make bugger all for. Then again, you guys aren't either, and it's only really one person's fault. Now, Conor Benn did tweet out, "I am truly gutted that we are unable to make this fight happen on Saturday, and I'm sorry to everyone who's been affected by the postponement. I am still completely shocked and surprised by this, and it has been a tough couple of days. My team and I will consider the next options, including rescheduling the fight, but my immediate focus is on clearing my name because I am a clean athlete." Replies turned off. Why? Go to the quote tweets. No one believes you. They're calling you a drug cheat and a steroid user. Eddie Hearn himself had to put out a statement via, Twitter as well, oddly enough. One issue that has been raised is that the B sample still hasn't given us the result yet, so we don't actually know if the findings are conclusive or not. But generally, if it's in the A sample, it'll be in the B sample as well. And just because it tickled me to no end, Chris Eubank, again still being active on Twitter, tweeted out a video of Conor Benn speaking about drug cheats. I'm not going to play that, but let's just say there might be some hypocrisy here. Until the B sample results are confirmed, we can't be sure. And a fan of Conor Benn has a tattoo of him on his torso, who cannot afford the laser treatment to remove Conor Benn, to which Chris Eubank has said, "I will pay for it. Just shoot over your info to my team and I'll sort everything out." Considering Eubank Jr.'s developed a reputation for blowing stacks playing poker, I'm surprised he had the money for that, but you know what? Player, you made a fan apparently. Congratulations. As far as I'm concerned, this highlights a number of issues in boxing right now. First of all, communication and transparency is key. Second, if the B sample comes back and that clomiphene is still in his system, in the B sample, which it should be anyway, then Conor Benn's reputation is in tatters. He will get a suspension, and Chris Eubank Jr. will go on his merry way knowing he doesn't have to fight Conor Benn, but he really does need to win a legitimate world title. No offense to the IBO at super middleweight, you won it twice, congratulations. It is a minor title, and you've held the WBA interim at middleweight twice. Focus on a real title, please. Triple G might retire soon, so go for one of his quickly, because while you marketed yourself as the next generation, you're at a stage in your career now where you need a world title to your name, or you're just going to be known as Chris Eubank Jr. and nothing more. If this fight does get rescheduled, I'll be very impressed, but if it does, I don't think Chris Eubank will want to have a rehydration clause or a weight drop clause. I think Conor Benn's going to have to jump through hoops to get this fight, and he'll probably have to come up to 160. If that happens, Chris Eubank definitely wins.